I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the neon orange envelope taped to my front door, but I never imagined it would lead me down a rabbit hole of fraud, corruption, and financial crimes that would rock our entire subdivision in Scottsdale, Arizona. My name is Xavier Garrison, and I'm a 34-year-old software engineer who bought my first house 18 months ago in the Sunset Ridge community. The development was one of those planned neighborhoods where everything looked picture perfect from the outside. Manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and houses that all seemed to follow the same architectural blueprint with minor variations. When I purchased the 3-bedroom ranch-style home, I knew there was a homeowners association, but the real estate agent assured me they were reasonable and rarely caused problems. That turned out to be the biggest lie I'd been told since my ex-girlfriend said she was fine with me working late. The orange envelope contained a violation notice dated 3 days prior, informing me that my house color was in direct violation of the community guidelines and that I had 15 days to remedy the situation or face fines starting at $200 per day. I stood there on my porch, reading and rereading the letter, completely baffled. My house was painted a soft sage green with cream trim, the exact same colors it had been when I bought it. I hadn't changed anything. I immediately pulled out my phone and called the number listed on the letterhead. A woman answered on the second ring with a tone that could freeze lava. Sunset Ridge, HOA. This is Karen Thornton speaking. Of course her name was Karen. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. Hi, this is Xavier Garrison from 2847 Desert Bloom Drive. I just received a violation notice about my paint color, but I haven't painted my house. It's the same color it was when I purchased the property. Mr. Garrison, she said, drawing out my name like it physically pained her to speak it. The approved color palette was updated 6 months ago at the annual meeting. Your home is now in violation. The notice clearly states you have 15 days to repaint using one of the approved colors from the current palette. I didn't attend the annual meeting. I was never notified about it. All homeowners were sent notifications via certified mail 30 days prior to the meeting. Failure to attend doesn't exempt you from the decisions made by the board. I felt my jaw clench. I never received any certified mail about a meeting. That sounds like a personal problem, Mr. Garrison. The notice stands. You have 15 days, or the fines begin. And if the fines accumulate to a certain threshold, we can place a lien on your property. Have a blessed day. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there staring at my phone, anger bubbling in my chest. This woman I'd never met was threatening to fine me $200 a day because they changed the rules without properly notifying me. The whole situation felt insane. That evening, I drove to my neighbor Tom's house 3 doors down. Tom was a retired accountant in his 60s who lived in Sunset Ridge since the development first opened 12 years ago. He was grilling burgers in his backyard when I knocked on his fence gate. Xavier, come on in. You want a burger? Got plenty? Thanks, Tom, but I'm here for information more than food. Did you go to the HOA annual meeting 6 months ago? Tom's expression darkened. Oh boy, you got hit with a violation notice, didn't you? How'd you know? Because Karen Thornton and her cronies have been going house to house, hitting people with violations for the stupidest things. Paint colors, mailbox heights, the wrong shade of mulch in flower beds. It's gotten completely out of control. He flipped a burger and shook his head. I went to the meeting. There were maybe 20 people there out of 300 homes in this community. They pushed through a bunch of new rules with hardly anyone present. I tried to argue against some of it, but Karen had her little voting block and they outnumbered the rest of us. This is insane. They can't just change rules and start fining people. Oh, they can, and they are. Check your HOA bylaws. As long as they provide notice of the meeting and hold a vote, the decisions are binding. Whether you actually received the notice or not, that's harder to prove. I went home and spent the next 3 hours digging through the massive folder of documents I'd received at closing. The HOA bylaws were buried in the middle, a dense 70-page document written in legal jargon that would put an insomniac to sleep. But Tom was right. The board had the authority to modify community standards with a simple majority vote at the annual meeting, provided proper notice was given to all homeowners. The problem was, I was absolutely certain I never received any certified mail. I would have remembered signing for it. I checked my records and found nothing. But proving a negative, proving I didn't receive something, that was going to be nearly impossible. Over the next week, I tried the diplomatic approach. I went to the HOA office, a small building near the community clubhouse, and requested a meeting with the board. The secretary, a mousy woman in her 50s who seemed terrified of her own shadow, told me the board only met once a month and the next meeting wasn't for 3 weeks. I explained my situation, but she just shrugged apologetically and said there was nothing she could do. I then attempted to reach other board members directly. According to the bylaws, the board consisted of 5 members, Karen Thornton as president, a vice president named Douglas Fletcher, a treasurer named Patricia Manning, a secretary named Robert Chen, and a member at large named Susan Wilcox. I managed to track down phone numbers for all of them through the community directory. Douglas Fletcher didn't return my calls. Patricia Manning listened to my complaint for about 30 seconds before telling me the president handled all violation disputes and I needed to speak with Karen. Robert Chen at least seemed sympathetic, but said he was new to the board and didn't want to step on anyone's toes. Susan Wilcox told me flat out that she agreed with the violation and that my house looked like an eyesore. An eyesore. My house looked exactly like it had for the past 15 years, and suddenly it was an eyesore. Day 15 arrived and I hadn't repainted. Partly out of principle, partly because I'd gotten quotes from 3 painting contractors and they all ranged between $6,000 and $8,000 to repaint the entire exterior. I didn't have that kind of money just lying around, and I certainly wasn't going to take out a loan because some power-hungry HOA president decided to flex her authority. The second notice arrived on day 16, informing me that I was now accruing fines of $200 per day, and that I had 30 additional days to comply before the matter would be turned over to the HOA's legal counsel for collection proceedings. I did the math. In 30 days, the fines would total $6,000. Combined with the cost of repainting, I was looking at close to $14,000, all because I had the audacity to maintain my home the way it had been when I purchased it. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. There had to be something I could do. This whole situation felt wrong, not just inconvenient or unfair, but genuinely corrupt. The way Karen had steamrolled the annual meeting with barely anyone present, the way she refused to even discuss the violation, the way the other board members seemed either terrified of her or completely in her pocket. The next morning, I decided to do some research. If Karen Thornton was abusing her power with these violations, maybe she was dirty in other ways too. I started with the basics, looking up public records for the HOA. Arizona law requires HOAs to make certain financial documents available to homeowners upon request, including budgets, financial statements, and meeting minutes. I sent a formal written request to the HOA office, citing the specific Arizona statute that granted me access to these records. The mousy secretary called me 2 days later, her voice even more timid than before. "Mr. Garrison, I have your records request. Ms. Thornton said I can provide you with the meeting minutes, but the financial documents require board approval." The statute doesn't say anything about requiring board approval. It says the documents must be made available within 10 business days of a written request. I understand, but Ms. Thornton is very particular about financial information. She said she needs to review your request with the HOA attorney first. I felt that familiar anger rising again. Fine, but I expect those documents within the statutory time frame, or I'll be filing a complaint with the state. Yes, sir, I'll let her know. 3 days later, I received a thick envelope containing the last 2 years of meeting minutes. I spread them out on my dining room table and started reading. Most of it was incredibly boring. Discussions about landscaping contracts, pool maintenance, and complaints about parking violations. But as I read through the financial portions, I started noticing something odd. Every few months, there were large expenditures approved for various projects. A new fence around the community playground for $18,000, resurfacing the tennis courts for $25,000, upgrading the clubhouse kitchen for $32,000. The amount seemed reasonable enough for those types of projects, but something nagged at me. I decided to take a walk around the community. The playground fence looked exactly the same as it had when I moved in, chain link and slightly rusted. The tennis courts had some cracks, but definitely didn't look newly resurfaced. And when I peeked through the clubhouse windows, the kitchen looked original, with appliances that had to be at least 15 years old. My stomach dropped. Unless I was completely mistaken, the HOA had approved and paid for projects that were never actually completed. And if that was true, where had the money gone? I needed the financial statements. Those would show the actual payments made to contractors. But I had a feeling Karen Thornton was going to stonewall me as long as possible. That afternoon, I called an attorney. His name was Marcus Webb, and he specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in Phoenix, about 30 minutes from my house. He agreed to see me the next day. Marcus was a tall man in his early 50s with silver hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen way too much HOA drama. His office was cluttered with case files, and he had a whiteboard on the wall covered in what looked like organizational charts for various HOAs. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair after I explained my situation, "Karen Thornton is the president of your HOA, and you think she's embezzling funds?" "I think something's going on. Projects that were supposedly completed don't actually exist, and she's blocking my access to financial records. The records request is the easy part. If she doesn't provide them within the statutory timeframe, we can file a motion to compel. The court will order her to produce the documents, and if she still refuses, she can be held in contempt." He tapped his pen on his desk. "But the embezzlement angle, that's trickier. Even if the projects don't exist, there could be legitimate explanations. Maybe the projects were started and abandoned. Maybe the money was spent on something else with board approval. What do I do? First, let's get those financial records. Once we have those, we can trace the payments and see where the money actually went. If it went to shell companies or back to Karen herself, then we've got something. If it went to legitimate contractors who can explain what happened, it gets more complicated." I hired Marcus on the spot. He drafted a formal demand letter to the HOA, threatening legal action if the financial records weren't produced within 5 business days. He sent it via email and certified mail to create a paper trail. While we waited, the fines continued to accumulate. I was now at $4,200 and counting. Every morning I woke up, I mentally added another $200 to the total. It was like watching a taxi meter run while stuck in traffic, except this meter could eventually cost me my house. On day 6 after Marcus sent the demand letter, the mousy secretary called me. "Mr. Garrison, I have the financial documents you requested. Ms. Thornton said you need to pick them up in person and sign for them. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The HOA office was empty except for the secretary when I arrived. She handed me another thick envelope, and I signed her logbook. As I turned to leave, she spoke quietly. "Mr. Garrison, be careful. Ms. Thornton, she doesn't like people questioning her authority. She's made life very difficult for other homeowners who've pushed back." I looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" She glanced at the door nervously. "I shouldn't say anything. I need this job. But just be careful, okay?" I drove straight to Marcus's office. We spent the next 3 hours going through the financial statements, cross-referencing expenses with the meeting minutes. What we found was damning. The $18,000 fence project had been paid to a company called Desert Barrier Solutions. The $25,000 tennis court resurfacing had been paid to Ace Paving and Surface. The $32,000 kitchen upgrade had been paid to Modern Kitchen Contractors. All 3 checks had been signed by Karen Thornton as HOA president. Marcus pulled up the Arizona Corporation Commission website and searched for the 3 companies. Desert Barrier Solutions didn't exist. Ace Paving and Surface didn't exist. Modern Kitchen Contractors didn't exist. "She's using fake companies," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded grimly. "It looks that way. She writes checks to companies that don't exist, which means she's probably cashing them herself or depositing them into accounts she controls." We kept digging. Over the past 2 years alone, we found evidence of payments totaling over $200,000 to companies that either didn't exist or couldn't be verified. The pattern was consistent. Karen would propose a project at a board meeting, the board would approve it, and then she'd cut a check to a fictitious contractor. "How's she getting away with this?" I asked. "Doesn't the board review the finances?" "They're supposed to. The treasurer should be catching this. But look here." Marcus pointed to a signature line on one of the financial statements. "Patricia Manning, the treasurer, is signing off on these statements. Either she's in on it, or she's not actually reviewing anything and just rubber stamping whatever Karen gives her." This was bigger than I'd imagined. This wasn't just HOA overreach or petty tyranny. This was actual criminal fraud, and it had been going on for years. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We go to the police. This is beyond HOA disputes. This is embezzlement, fraud, possibly forgery if she's creating fake invoices to justify these payments. We need to document everything we've found and turn it over to law enforcement." That evening, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with the implications of what we'd uncovered. Karen Thornton had been systematically stealing from hundreds of homeowners for years, and she'd been using her position of authority to silence anyone who questioned her. The violation notices, the fines, the liens, they were all tools to keep people in line, and I'd stumbled into her crosshairs just by asking questions. The next morning, Marcus and I went to the Scottsdale Police Department. We asked to speak with someone in the Financial Crimes Unit and were directed to Detective Sarah Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s who listened to our story with increasing interest. "Do you have documentation of these payments?" she asked. Marcus slid the folder across her desk. "Financial statements, meeting minutes, and our research showing that these contractor companies don't exist." Detective Martinez spent several minutes reviewing the documents. "This is substantial. I'm going to need to open a formal investigation. Mr. Garrison, I'll need a full statement from you about how you discovered this. Mr. Webb, I may need you to provide documentation about your research process as well." "Whatever you need," I said. "One thing I need to make clear," Detective Martinez said, looking at me seriously. "Once we start investigating, this is going to become public. The HOA will know you're the one who brought this to our attention. If Ms. Thornton is as vindictive as you say, she may retaliate. She's already threatening to put a lien on my house over a paint color. I don't think it can get much worse." Detective Martinez raised an eyebrow. "You'd be surprised, but I appreciate your willingness to come forward. A lot of people in your situation would just pay the fines and try to avoid trouble." I left the police station feeling both relieved and anxious. Relieved that someone with actual authority was taking this seriously. Anxious about what Karen would do when she found out I'd gone to the police. I didn't have to wait long to find out. 2 days later, I received another notice from the HOA. This one informed me that due to my accumulated unpaid fines, which now totaled $6,400, the board had voted to place a lien on my property. The lien would attach to my home's title and would need to be paid in full with interest before I could sell or refinance the property. I immediately called Marcus. "They can't do this while there's an active police investigation, can they?" "Unfortunately, they can. The investigation doesn't automatically halt their ability to enforce violations. We'd need to file an injunction to stop the lien, and that requires going to court." "Then let's go to court." "Xavier, court takes time and money. Filing fees, my hourly rate, it adds up fast. And there's no guarantee a judge will grant the injunction before the lien is recorded." I felt trapped. Karen had me in a corner, and she knew it. Even if the investigation eventually proved she was a criminal, she could still cause me massive financial harm in the meantime. That night, I did something impulsive. I drove to Karen Thornton's house. I'd looked up her address in the community directory, and she lived in one of the larger homes in Sunset Ridge, a 2-story with a 3-car garage on Desert Vista Court. Her house was painted a pristine white with dove gray trim, immaculate landscaping, and decorative lights illuminating the walkway. Everything about it screamed expensive, far more expensive than what an HOA president's stipend would cover. According to the financial statements, Karen received a modest annual payment of $3,000 for her role as president, yet her house looked like it belonged in a luxury magazine. I sat in my car across the street, staring at her house, wondering how many homeowners' dues had paid for those fancy landscaping lights. How many families had struggled to pay unexpected fines and fees while Karen was living large off stolen money? My phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Tom, my neighbor. "Xavier, where are you?" "I'm out. Why?" "There's a police car at your house. I saw them knock on your door, and when you didn't answer, they left a card in your door frame." My heart jumped. "What did the card say?" I walked over and looked. "It's from Detective Martinez. Says to call her as soon as possible." I thanked Tom and immediately called the detective. "Mr. Garrison, thanks for calling back. I need you to come to the station tomorrow morning if possible. We've made some progress on the investigation, and I have some questions." "What kind of progress?" "I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you be here at 9? "I'll be there." I drove home, my mind racing with possibilities. What had they found? Had they already confronted Karen? Were there other victims? The next morning, I arrived at the police station 15 minutes early. Detective Martinez met me in the lobby and led me to a small conference room. On the table were several boxes of documents and a laptop. "Mr. Garrison, I want to thank you again for bringing this to our attention. In the past 48 hours, we've uncovered what appears to be a systematic fraud scheme that's been operating for at least 5 years, possibly longer." 5 years? "We pulled banking records for the HOA accounts. Karen Thornton has signature authority as president, and she's been writing checks to fictitious companies and depositing them into accounts she controls. We've identified at least 4 different shell companies and 3 bank accounts in various names, including her maiden name and what appears to be her daughter's name." "How much are we talking about?" Detective Martinez pulled up a spreadsheet on the laptop. "Conservatively, just over $400,000. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. $400,000 stolen from homeowners who were just trying to maintain their community. We're bringing her in for questioning this afternoon," Detective Martinez continued. "But before we do, I wanted to ask if you've received any threats or noticed anything unusual. Sometimes when suspects realize they're under investigation, they try to intimidate witnesses." "Just the lien on my house. That happened right after I came to see you. I saw that in the documents you provided. We may be able to use that as evidence of retaliation, which could add obstruction charges to the fraud counts." She made a note on her legal pad. "I also wanted to let you know that we've contacted the other board members. Patricia Manning, the treasurer, claims she had no knowledge of the fake companies. She says Karen told her the financial statements were already audited and approved and she just needed signatures. We're still investigating whether she was complicit or just negligent." "What about the other board members?" "Douglas Fletcher, Robert Chen, and Susan Wilcox all claim they trusted Karen to handle the financial details and didn't review the actual expenditures. They approved projects based on her presentations, but never verified the work was completed. So she basically had free rein to do whatever she wanted." "That's how it appears. It's a common pattern in HOA fraud cases. One person gains control, surrounds themselves with passive board members who don't ask questions, and then exploits the lack of oversight." I left the police station feeling vindicated, but also angry. Angry that this had been allowed to happen. Angry that Karen had gotten away with it for so long. Angry that I'd been targeted just for asking legitimate questions. That afternoon, I worked from home, constantly refreshing the local news websites to see if anything had been reported about the investigation. Around 4 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Have you seen the news?" "No, what happened?" "Karen Thornton was arrested about an hour ago. The police issued a press release. It's all over the local stations." I pulled up the website for the local ABC affiliate. There, on the homepage, was a story titled "HOA President Arrested for Embezzlement." The article detailed the investigation and the charges against Karen, 19 counts of fraud, 12 counts of embezzlement, and 3 counts of forgery. My phone started buzzing with text messages from neighbors. Tom sent me a link to the story with the message, "Holy hell, you were right." Another neighbor, Jennifer, who I'd spoken with briefly about the violations, texted, "Is this why you were asking about the HOA finances? You're a hero." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt exhausted and still stressed about the lien on my house. Over the next few days, the story exploded in local media. Multiple homeowners came forward with stories of harassment, excessive fines, and questionable violations. It turned out I wasn't the only one who'd been targeted. Karen had been systematically going after anyone who questioned her authority, using the violation system as a weapon to keep people scared and compliant. The state attorney general's office announced they were also launching an investigation into the HOA's practices and whether there were systemic failures in oversight. The remaining board members all resigned in disgrace, and an emergency election was called to install a new board. Marcus filed a motion to remove the lien from my property, arguing that it was placed in retaliation for my role in exposing the fraud. The judge agreed and ordered the lien removed immediately, along with all accumulated fines. The judge also ordered the HOA to reimburse me for my legal fees and to rescind the paint violation since the color palette change had been pushed through improperly. Karen's preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after her arrest. I was listed as a potential witness, but the prosecutor told me that would likely depend on whether she decided to take a plea deal. In the meantime, life in Sunset Ridge was chaotic. The community was in an uproar, with neighbors arguing about who should be on the new board and what reforms were needed. A special meeting was called, and for the first time in the development's history, nearly every homeowner attended. The meeting was held at the local high school gymnasium because the clubhouse wasn't big enough. I arrived early and found a seat near the front. Tom sat next to me, along with several other neighbors who'd been hit with violations. The meeting was run by a court-appointed mediator since there was no functioning board. He explained the situation, the criminal charges against Karen, the financial losses to the HOA, and the need to elect new leadership immediately. "Before we proceed with nominations," the mediator said, "I want to address the financial situation. The HOA's operating account has approximately $73,000 remaining. However, we estimate that over $400,000 was stolen over the past several years. The HOA may be able to recover some of that money through insurance claims and potentially through asset seizure if Ms. Thornton is convicted, but there are no guarantees." A man in the back stood up. "Does that mean we're going to have a special assessment to cover the shortfall?" "That's a decision for the new board to make, but realistically, yes, there will likely need to be additional funding to maintain the community and cover any legal expenses related to the situation." The crowd erupted in angry murmurs. People had already been paying monthly dues, and now they were being told they'd have to pay even more because of one person's crimes. The mediator let the noise die down before continuing. "I understand this is frustrating, but the reality is that the HOA is a separate legal entity, and its debts are the responsibility of all homeowners. We need to focus on moving forward and ensuring this never happens again." The nomination process began. Several people were nominated, including Tom and Jennifer. I was surprised when someone nominated me. "Xavier Garrison has shown real courage in exposing this fraud," the woman said. "He put himself at risk to protect this community. I think he'd make an excellent board member." I felt my face flush. I hadn't expected this. Before I could decline, several other people voiced their support. "I'll accept the nomination," I heard myself saying, "but only if we agree to implement real financial oversight, regular audits, transparent reporting, and limits on any single person's authority." The crowd applauded. By the end of the meeting, 5 new board members had been elected. Tom was voted president, Jennifer became vice president, and I was elected treasurer. 2 other homeowners, David and Margaret, were elected to fill the remaining positions. Our first official meeting was held the following week. We immediately hired an independent auditor to review the HOA's finances and recommend reforms. We also voted to implement several new policies requiring approval from at least 3 board members for any expenditure over $1,000, mandatory quarterly audits by an outside firm, and monthly financial reports posted on a new HOA website for all homeowners to review. The auditor's report came back 3 weeks later. It confirmed everything Detective Martinez had found and more. Karen had been stealing money in small amounts at first, then got bolder as no one questioned her. She'd fabricated invoices, forged contractor signatures, and even created fake email accounts to make it look like she was communicating with legitimate businesses. The total amount stolen was actually closer to $460,000, even more than initially estimated. Karen's attorney reached out to the prosecutor about a plea deal. She would plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 8 years in prison and full restitution to the HOA. The The prosecutor called me to get my input as one of the key witnesses. 8 years seems light for stealing nearly $500,000, I said. It does, the prosecutor agreed. But the reality is that if we go to trial, there's always a chance a jury could acquit or convict on lesser charges. A plea deal guarantees she serves time and guarantees restitution. Plus, she's agreed to cooperate fully in identifying where the money went, which increases our chances of recovering assets. What about the other board members, Patricia Manning and the others who didn't do their jobs? We're not pursuing criminal charges against them. There's no evidence they knowingly participated in the fraud. However, the HOA could pursue civil action for breach of fiduciary duty if they wanted. Tom and I discussed it at the next board meeting. We ultimately decided not to pursue civil action against the former board members. They'd been negligent, but they'd also been manipulated by someone they trusted. Going after them legally would cost the HOA more money in legal fees and wouldn't significantly increase the recovery amount. Karen's sentencing hearing was scheduled for early September, about 4 months after her arrest. I attended, along with Tom and several other homeowners. The courtroom was packed. Karen looked nothing like the imperious woman who'd sneered at me over the phone months earlier. She wore an orange jail jumpsuit, her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she looked small and defeated. The judge reviewed the plea agreement and asked if she understood the charges and the sentence. "Yes, Your Honor," Karen said quietly. Several homeowners were allowed to give victim impact statements. Tom went first, talking about how the stolen money had been meant to maintain and improve the community, and how Karen's actions had broken the trust of hundreds of families. Jennifer spoke about the harassment and intimidation tactics Karen had used, creating an environment of fear in what should have been a welcoming neighborhood. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium, my prepared statement in hand. "Your Honor, my name is Xavier Garrison. I'm the homeowner who first discovered Ms. Thornton's fraud scheme. When I asked questions about HOA finances, she tried to intimidate me into silence. She placed a lien on my home over a paint color, knowing that I couldn't afford to fight both the violation and her fraud. She used her authority as HOA president as a weapon against anyone who dared to question her." I looked at Karen, who kept her eyes down. But more than that, she stole from families. She stole from retirees on fixed incomes, from young couples trying to start their lives, from single parents struggling to make ends meet. She took money that was supposed to make our community better and used it to fund her own lifestyle. That's not just a crime. It's a betrayal of the worst kind. I returned to my seat, my hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. The judge then addressed Karen directly. "Ms. Thornton, you held a position of trust in your community. People elected you to represent their interests and manage their collective resources. Instead, you exploited that trust for personal gain. Your actions were calculated, deliberate, and sustained over many years. While I'm bound by the plea agreement, I want to be clear that your conduct was reprehensible." The judge accepted the plea deal and sentenced Karen to 8 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections with no possibility of parole for at least 5 years. She was also ordered to pay full restitution of $460,000 plus interest. As the bailiff led Karen away, she finally looked up, her eyes scanning the courtroom. For just a moment, her gaze met mine. There was no defiance there anymore, just resignation and perhaps a hint of shame. The weeks following the sentencing were a whirlwind of activity. The HOA's insurance company agreed to cover a portion of the losses, about $150,000, which helped significantly. The state also seized several of Karen's assets, including her car and some jewelry, which were auctioned off to help pay restitution. But even with those recoveries, the HOA was still facing a significant shortfall. The new board made the difficult decision to implement a special assessment of $800 per household to be paid over 2 years. It was painful for many families, but it was necessary to maintain the community's financial stability. We also increased the monthly dues slightly to build up a reserve fund, something that should have been done years ago. As treasurer, I worked closely with the auditor to implement new financial controls. We set up a system where every check required 2 signatures, where all invoices had to be verified before payment, and where monthly reconciliations were reviewed by the full board. It was more work, but it meant that what happened with Karen could never happen again. The community slowly began to heal. The new board made a point of being accessible and transparent. We held quarterly town halls where homeowners could ask questions and voice concerns. We created committees for different aspects of community management, landscape, events, finances, architectural review, so more people were involved in decision-making. We also completely overhauled the violation process. No more arbitrary fines for paint colors or mailbox heights. We focused on legitimate safety and maintenance issues, and we always gave homeowners reasonable notice and the opportunity to discuss concerns before any fines were imposed. The neon orange violation envelopes were retired in favor of friendly reminder letters. About 6 months after Karen's sentencing, I was working in my garage when a car pulled up. A woman in her 30s got out, looking nervous. "Are you Xavier Garrison?" "Yes, can I help you?" "My name is Amanda Thornton. I'm Karen's daughter." I felt myself tense. "Okay. I wanted to apologize for what my mother did, for what she put you and everyone else through." Amanda's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. I had no idea what she was doing, I swear. When the police contacted me about the bank account in my name, I was completely shocked. "The police cleared you, didn't they?" "Yes, but that doesn't change the fact that she used me. She opened accounts in my name without my knowledge, forged my signature, and I feel responsible for not seeing what she was doing." "You're not responsible for your mother's choices." "I know, but still." Amanda wiped her eyes. "I also wanted you to know that I'm working with the prosecutor to help locate more assets. My mother had hidden some money in accounts I only just found out about. It's not much, maybe $30,000, but it's something. That helps? Thank you for coming forward with that." "It's the least I can do. This whole situation, it's destroyed my family. My father divorced her. My brother won't speak to her. And I'm left trying to figure out who my mother really was, because the person who did this isn't the person I thought I knew." We talked for a few more minutes. Amanda was clearly struggling with the weight of her mother's crimes and the impact on her family. Before she left, I told her something I hoped she'd remember. "Your mother made terrible choices, but they're her choices, not yours. You're doing the right thing by trying to help make this right. Don't let her mistakes define you." She thanked me and drove away. I stood in my driveway for a long time afterward, thinking about how many people had been affected by Karen's actions. It wasn't just the homeowners who'd been robbed. It was her own family, people who loved her and trusted her, only to discover she'd been living a lie. The following spring, nearly a year after I'd first received that neon orange violation notice, the community held a celebration. The playground that Karen had supposedly funded years ago was finally being built, this time for real. The board had saved up money from the monthly dues, and several homeowners had volunteered their time to help with construction to keep costs down. Tom and I stood watching as families brought their children to play on the new equipment. Kids were laughing and running around, completely unaware of the drama that had made this moment possible. "You ever think about how this all started?" Tom asked. "With that stupid paint violation?" "All the time," I said. "If she'd just left me alone, if she hadn't tried to bully me into compliance, she might still be getting away with it. Pride comes before the fall, or so they say." "I guess so." A little girl ran past us, chasing her brother toward the swings. Her mother called after her to be careful, and the girl just laughed. "This is what it should have been all along," Tom said. "A community where people feel safe and happy, where the HOA actually serves the homeowners instead of terrorizing them. We're getting there. Still a lot of work to do, but we're getting there." My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Detective Martinez. The subject line read, "Asset Recovery Update." I opened it and read quickly. The police had located another account containing $47,000 that Karen had hidden. Combined with Amanda's discovery, the HOA would be recovering an additional $77,000. It wasn't everything, but it was significant. I showed Tom the email, and he grinned. "That's good news. We might be able to reduce the special assessment sooner than we thought. I'll bring it up at the next board meeting." We stayed at the playground for another hour, just enjoying the scene. Eventually, I headed home. As I pulled into my driveway, I looked at my house, still painted sage green with cream trim. The color that had started this whole mess. The color that was now a symbol of my refusal to be bullied. I'd received a letter from the new Architectural Review Committee a few weeks earlier. They were updating the community guidelines again, this time with input from dozens of homeowners. The new color palette would include nearly 30 different approved combinations, including sage green with cream trim. But more importantly, the new rules included a grandfather clause. Any house painted before a rule change would be exempt from compliance unless the owner chose to repaint. Inside my house, I poured myself a drink and sat on my back patio. The Arizona sunset was spectacular, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The violation notice, the investigation, the arrest, the sentencing, the rebuilding of the community. It had been exhausting and stressful, and there were moments when I'd wondered if it was worth the fight. But sitting there, knowing that Karen was in prison, knowing that the HOA was now functioning properly, knowing that other homeowners wouldn't have to go through what I went through, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I'd bought this house as an investment in my future, a place to build a life. I never expected that defending it would require exposing a massive fraud scheme and completely reforming the HOA. But in a strange way, the whole experience had made Sunset Ridge feel more like home than ever before. My phone rang. It was Marcus, my attorney, who'd become a friend through this whole process. Xavier, just calling to let you know I got the final bill from the HOA for your reimbursed legal fees. Check should arrive within the week. That's great. Thanks, Marcus. I also wanted to say, what you did took guts. Most people would have just paid the fines and moved on. You could have made things a lot easier on yourself. Maybe, but that's not how I'm wired. If something's wrong, you fix it. The world needs more people like you. Anyway, I'll let you go. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me. We hung up, and I sat there thinking about his words. I didn't see myself as particularly brave or special. I'd just been a guy who asked questions and followed the evidence where it led. But maybe that was enough. Maybe that was what being a good neighbor and a good citizen meant, caring enough to speak up when something wasn't right. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the backyard lights automatically turned on. I could hear my neighbors on either side, the sounds of dinner being prepared, television shows playing, normal suburban evening sounds. These were good people who'd been taken advantage of, and now they had a chance to move forward without that shadow hanging over them. 2 weeks later, I attended my final meeting related to the Karen Thornton case. It was a civil proceeding where the HOA's attorney was presenting the final accounting of recovered funds and closing out the restitution claim. Karen appeared via video from prison, her attorney beside her in a different location. The judge reviewed the figures. Between the insurance payout, asset seizures, the discovered accounts, and ongoing garnishment of any money Karen earned in prison, the HOA had recovered approximately $230,000 of the $460,000 stolen. It was 50%, not everything, but far better than many fraud victims ever see. The judge asked if the HOA wished to pursue additional collection efforts. Tom, representing the board, spoke clearly. No, Your Honor, we believe we've recovered everything that's reasonably recoverable. We'd like to close this chapter and move forward. The judge nodded approvingly. Very well. The restitution order will remain in effect, and any additional funds recovered will be directed to the HOA, but the active collection efforts will cease. Ms. Thornton, do you have anything you wish to say? On the video screen, Karen looked directly at the camera. She looked older than she had at sentencing, more tired. Your Honor, I just want to say again how sorry I am. I know sorry doesn't fix what I did. I know I can never truly make it right. But I'm genuinely remorseful for the pain I caused. To Xavier Garrison specifically, I want to apologize. You were just asking legitimate questions, and I tried to destroy you for it. That was wrong, and I'm sorry. I felt eyes on me in the courtroom. I didn't say anything, just gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. The judge concluded the hearing, and everyone began filing out. Tom caught up with me in the hallway. How do you feel? Honestly? Relieved. It's finally over. You want to grab lunch? My treat. Sure, that sounds good. We went to a local diner and spent an hour talking about normal things, upcoming community events, Tom's grandkids, my job, anything but HOA drama and embezzlement. It felt good to just be regular neighbors again. As we were finishing our meal, Tom said something that stuck with me. You know, Xavier, you gave this community a gift, not just exposing the fraud, but showing people that they have a voice, that they don't have to accept abuse from people in authority. Homeowners are more engaged now than they've ever been. We've got volunteers for everything. People actually show up to meetings. That's because of you. It's because of all of us, I said. You, Jennifer, all the homeowners who spoke up and got involved. I just asked the first question. Sometimes that's the hardest part, being the first one to say something's wrong. We paid the bill and headed out. As I drove home, I thought about Tom's words. Maybe I'd given the community something, but they'd given me something too. A sense of purpose, a feeling of belonging, proof that doing the right thing actually matters. That weekend, I did something I'd been putting off for months. I painted my mailbox. Not because the HOA required it, but because I wanted to. I chose a nice shade of blue that complemented my house colors. As I worked, several neighbors stopped to chat. Kids rode their bikes past. Someone was having a barbecue down the street, and the smell of grilled burgers drifted through the air. This was what a community should feel like. Safe, friendly, normal. Monday morning, I was back at my computer, working on code for my software company. My phone dinged with a notification from the HOA website, something I'd set up as treasurer to keep everyone informed. It was the monthly financial report, showing income and expenses, reserve fund balances, and upcoming projects. Everything transparent, everything accountable. I smiled, closed the notification, and got back to work. Life in Sunset Ridge had returned to normal, or maybe it had reached normal for the first time. Either way, I was happy to be just another homeowner in just another Arizona subdivision, dealing with the regular challenges of life without the added drama of HOA corruption. My house was still sage green with cream trim. My mailbox was now blue. And somewhere in an Arizona prison, Karen Thornton was serving her sentence, hopefully thinking about the choices that had led her there. As for me, I'd learned some valuable lessons. I'd learned that asking questions is important, even when it's uncomfortable. I'd learned that corruption thrives when good people stay silent. And I'd learned that sometimes fighting back against injustice is worth the cost, even when it seems easier to just comply. But mostly, I'd learned that home isn't just a building. It's a community, a neighborhood, a place where people look out for each other and work together to make things better. And now, finally, Sunset Ridge felt like home. 3 months later, I was elected president of the HOA board after Tom decided to step down to spend more time with his family. I accepted the position with the promise to continue the transparency and accountability reforms we'd implemented. My first act as president was to establish a whistleblower policy protecting any homeowner who reported suspected fraud or abuse without fear of retaliation. The policy was named the Garrison Accountability Initiative, which made me uncomfortable, but the board insisted. They said it was important to remember how the reform started and why it mattered. I stood in front of the community at my first meeting as president, looking out at the faces of my neighbors, people I'd fought for and who'd supported me through the whole ordeal. I know we've been through a lot as a community, I said, but we've come out stronger. We've proven that transparency works, that accountability matters, and that when homeowners work together, we can create the kind of neighborhood we all want to live in. My job as president isn't to rule over you or make demands, it's to serve this community and make sure your voices are heard. So thank you for trusting me with this responsibility. Let's keep building something great together. The applause was genuine and warm. After the meeting, dozens of people came up to shake my hand and offer congratulations. Jennifer, now serving her second term as vice president, smiled at me. You're going to do great. Just remember, it's okay to ask for help when you need it. I'll remember that. Thanks, Jennifer. Walking home that night, I looked at the houses lining the streets of Sunset Ridge. Lights glowing in windows, cars in driveways, the occasional sound of laughter or music drifting through the evening air. This was my community now, not just in the sense of where I lived, but in a deeper way. I'd invested in it, fought for it, and helped reshape it into something better. The neon orange violation notice that had started everything was long gone, but I'd kept it. It was in a frame in my office, a reminder of how quickly things can escalate when someone abuses power, and how important it is to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. As I unlocked my front door and stepped inside my sage green house with cream trim, I felt genuinely content. The battle was over, the community was healing, and life could finally just be life again. No investigations, no court hearings, no drama. Just a regular guy in a regular house in a regular neighborhood in Scottsdale, Arizona. And that was exactly how I wanted it.